It begins in a place where the world wasn't paying close attention. In the late years of the Soviet-Afghan War, a young Saudi named Osama bin Laden moved through the mountains with a mix of calm confidence and unwavering purpose. He wasn't yet the figure whose image would appear on global news screens. He was simply a wealthy idealist funding fighters pushing the Soviets out of Afghanistan. He brought money, equipment, and construction skills from his family's business. To those around him, he seemed almost gentle in speech, yet intense in belief. To the CIA, he was a name that showed up only on the edges of reports. Nothing more. But once the Soviets withdrew, bin Laden didn't fade away. He left Afghanistan for Sudan, gathered loyal followers, and later returned to Afghanistan with a vision far more organized than anything he'd been connected to before. He created Al-Qaeda, a structure built on discipline, religious conviction, and secrecy. And as the organization grew, intelligence agencies began to sense that he was becoming more than a background figure. His messages became sharper, his network larger, his intentions darker. In the mid-1990s, analysts at the CIA noticed more chatter involving his name. Nothing dramatic at first, just scattered evidence, phone calls routed through unusual locations, money transfers hidden behind seemingly legitimate operations, and a rising number of extremists who spoke of him with admiration, sometimes fear. At the FBI, the aftermath of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing showed that the United States had enemies capable of striking inside its borders. Though bin Laden wasn't the mastermind of that attack, the ideology behind it felt tied to something bigger, something that seemed to be gathering momentum overseas. By 1996, the CIA formed a small unit focused solely on bin Laden. A few analysts worked in a cramped space inside the counter-terrorist center, dedicating long hours to understanding his motivations and his growing network. They dug through reports from allies, watched early training videos, and studied interviews and speeches. They saw a man shifting from extremist thinker to active planner, someone searching for a way to make his message echo across continents. Their warnings grew louder, but outside their unit, many officials thought bin Laden was more noise than threat and angry voice rather than a capable enemy. That belief didn't last. In 1998, bin Laden issued a fatwa declaring it a duty to kill Americans. Months later, bombs detonated outside U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. The blast tore through crowded streets, killing more than 200 people and injuring thousands. The FBI responded immediately, sending teams into scenes filled with dust, twisted metal, and the shock of families trying to understand what had happened. Agents walked through debris, collecting fragments from the bombs, interviewing witnesses still trembling with fear. The evidence pointed straight to Al-Qaeda. The CIA gathered intelligence from across the region, piecing together the structure of the cell behind the attacks. Together, the FBI and CIA presented the clearest picture yet of who bin Laden was and what he was capable of. Missiles were fired at Al-Qaeda training camps in Afghanistan, but bin Laden survived. To some of his followers, that survival felt like a sign of destiny. To U.S. intelligence, it was a warning that he wasn't going to be stopped easily. The analysts watching him understood something many others didn't. He wasn't finished. He had something larger in mind. They wrote memos describing the possibility of an attack that would be calculated, coordinated, and devastating. But the world was spinning with other issues, and the full weight of those warnings didn't settle in time. On the morning of September 11, 2001, the threat announced itself in a way no one could ignore. Two planes struck the Twin Towers. One hit the Pentagon. Another crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after passengers fought to stop it. The images defined a generation. Smoke rising through blue sky, buildings collapsing, people running covered in ash. Agents in the FBI's Newark office raced into danger, some barely surviving the collapse. At CIA headquarters, analysts stared at screens, knowing within minutes who had orchestrated the nightmare. The hunt for Osama bin Laden became the most urgent mission in American intelligence history. The FBI began reconstructing the lives of the hijackers. Every phone call, every flight lesson, every person they met became part of a map that stretched across continents. They uncovered financial trails, training patterns, and safe houses. The CIA focused on capturing or killing al-Qaeda operatives and gathering intelligence that could reveal where bin Laden had gone. The U.S. launched a war in Afghanistan, targeting the Taliban regime that sheltered him. In the mountains of Tora Bora, it looked like the hunt might end quickly. Intelligence suggested bin Laden was trapped in a network of caves. Local fighters claimed they saw a tall man moving with bodyguards. Drones picked up unusual heat signatures. U.S. forces moved in, but the terrain was unforgiving. Bin Laden slipped through mountain passes that had served as escape routes for centuries. When the smoke cleared, he was gone, and the mission shifted from a short pursuit to a long, grinding search. For years, bin Laden vanished behind Pakistan's chaotic mix of urban centers, tribal regions, and remote valleys. The FBI continued tracking al-Qaeda operatives. The CIA sifted through conversations, financial records, and informant reports. Slowly, the picture formed. Bin Laden had cut all electronic communication. No phones, no internet, no written notes. He relied only on couriers, trusted men who memorized messages and carried them across borders. Finding him meant finding the couriers. A name resurfaced during an interrogation, a nickname repeated in old intelligence files, but never recognized as important. Analysts took the small details seriously. They dug through older reports, connecting pieces that had once seemed unrelated. They identified the courier. Then they found his brother. Over time, they learned the two men traveled together frequently, loyal to bin Laden to an almost alarming degree. Years of patient surveillance finally paid off when the courier made a phone call. He used extreme caution, but no call is completely invisible. Signals bounced off cell towers in a pattern that pointed to Abbottabad, Pakistan. CIA officers visited the city quietly. They noticed a large, unusual compound with high walls and barbed wire. No internet, no landlines, few visitors. Trash burned inside the walls. A family that never stepped outside. And the courier, this was the most important detail, regularly entered the compound. The CIA rented a house nearby and set up eyes on the compound. They watched for months. They observed a tall man walking inside the courtyard with a slow, deliberate pace. They couldn't see his face clearly, but his height and posture resembled bin Laden's. Analysts at Langley studied the footage repeatedly, debating every detail: his stride, his clothing, the way others gave him space. They couldn't be certain, but this was the strongest lead in 10 years. Planning the raid took weeks. A model of the compound was built. The assault team rehearsed late into the night, studying every door, every possible obstacle, every room where someone could hide or fight back. The risk was enormous. If the mission failed or struck the wrong target, the diplomatic fallout could be severe. But the chance felt too important to ignore. On the night of May 1, 2011, the helicopters lifted off from Afghanistan toward Abbottabad. The operators inside were steady, their movements controlled, their nerves trained for moments where hesitation could cost lives. As the first helicopter descended into the compound, trapped air caused it to crash. No one was killed, but the plan had to shift instantly. The team adapted with practiced calm, securing the crash site and rushing into the compound. The second helicopter landed outside. Operators cut through barriers, moved through rooms, and cleared the building floor by floor. They encountered the courier, then his brother, then women and children caught in the chaos. At the top floor, they found a tall man who matched the profile they had studied for months. Within seconds, the man who had eluded the world for a decade was dead. The team gathered everything of value: computers, papers, memory drives, and destroyed the crash helicopter before lifting off. In Washington, news of success arrived quietly, almost gently, after years of tension. For many who had worked the case from the beginning, the moment felt less like victory and more like a long breath finally released. The FBI examined the recovered materials for months. Letters revealed that bin Laden struggled to control al-Qaeda from hiding. His influence was weaker than many feared. He worried about his security constantly. The CIA used the intel to track other operatives and disrupt future attacks. The story of the hunt for bin Laden is often remembered for the final raid, but the truth stretches through years of slow, patient work. Analysts tracking minor clues, agents following faint trails, conversations remembered long after they were spoken. It's about small details that eventually led to one compound, one night, and one ending. And in the quiet after the final moment, the world understood that a long and painful chapter had finally closed.